Everly Walsh stood in front of the imposing Thornhill Enterprises building, her worn leather portfolio clutched tightly against her chest like a shield. Rain spattered against her second-hand blazer, purchased just yesterday from a thrift store with the last of her savings. The foreclosure notice on her childhood home was due in 2 weeks, and her mother's medical bills continued to pile up on their kitchen table like fallen autumn leaves. This interview wasn't just another job opportunity. It was her last hope. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, trying to ignore the flutter of anxiety in her stomach as she pushed through the revolving door into the gleaming lobby. Marble floors stretched before her, and a security guard eyed her suspiciously as she approached the reception desk. She felt out of place among the immaculately dressed employees striding purposefully across the atrium, their designer shoes clicking confidently on the polished floor. "I'm here for an interview with HR," Everly said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Everly Walsh, for the executive assistant position." The receptionist glanced at her computer screen, perfectly manicured nails tapping against the keyboard. "Yes, Ms. Walsh. 42nd floor. They're expecting you." The elevator ride seemed endless, each ping of passing floors amplifying her nerves. Everly used the reflective doors to check her appearance. Her chestnut hair was neatly pinned back, but the dark circles under her hazel eyes told the story of sleepless nights spent caring for her mother and worrying about their future. She straightened her blazer, noting with dismay a small coffee stain on the cuff that hadn't been visible in the dim light of her apartment. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a world of glass, chrome, and hushed voices. The reception area of the HR department was minimalist and intimidating, much like the company's reputation in the business world. Thornhill Enterprises had transformed from a modest tech startup to a global powerhouse in just over a decade, largely due to the ruthless business acumen of its founder and CEO, Alexander Thornhill. "Ms. Walsh," a polished woman with a sleek bob approached. "I'm Vivian, HR coordinator. We're ready for you." The interview room contained not one but 3 interviewers, all wearing expressions of professional disinterest as they reviewed her resume. Everly forced a smile, trying to project confidence despite knowing her qualifications paled in comparison to candidates from prestigious universities. Her community college degree and experience as an administrative assistant at a small local business were all she had to offer. "Ms. Walsh," began a gray-haired man who introduced himself as the HR director. "Your resume lacks the experience we typically require. Why should Thornhill Enterprises consider you for this position?" Everly took a deep breath. "What I lack in experience, I make up for in determination and adaptability. I've managed complex scheduling, client relations, and administrative systems in high-pressure environments. I'm a quick learner who thrives on challenges." The interview continued with increasingly difficult questions designed to expose her limitations. Everly answered each one thoughtfully, drawing on practical examples from her previous role. Just as she began to think she might actually have a chance, the office door swung open. The atmosphere in the room instantly changed. The interviewers straightened in their chairs as a tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit entered. Even without the whispered Mr. Thornhill from one of the interviewers, Everly would have recognized him from countless business magazine covers and television appearances. Alexander Thornhill, 34 years old and one of the youngest billionaires in the country, commanded the room with his mere presence. His steel blue eyes scanned the room before landing on Everly. She resisted the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. "I apologize for interrupting," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "Vivian, my executive assistant, just submitted her 2 weeks' notice. We need to expedite the hiring process." The HR director cleared his throat. "Actually, sir, we're interviewing for that position now. This is Everly Walsh." Alexander Thornhill's gaze returned to Everly, more focused this time. She felt as though he was assessing every detail about her, from her scuffed shoes to her determined expression. "Ms. Walsh, I have an emergency conference call with our Tokyo office in 30 minutes, he said abruptly. "My notes are disorganized, the presentation isn't finalized, and I need 3 specific reports that are somewhere in the digital disaster that is my email inbox. If you were my assistant, how would you handle this situation?" Everly didn't hesitate. "I'd prioritize the presentation first, using a template to quickly format the key points while simultaneously searching for the reports using specific keywords and sender information. I'd organize your notes into talking points while the conference line is being established, and I'd prepare a follow-up email summarizing action items immediately after the call concludes." A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed his face before he nodded curtly. "Continue with the interview. I'd want your assessment on my desk within the hour." With that, he left as suddenly as he had appeared. The remaining interview questions seemed perfunctory. 15 minutes later, Everly was back in the elevator, descending to the lobby, convinced she had blown her opportunity in front of the CEO himself. Her phone rang as she reached the street. An unknown number. "Hello, Ms. Walsh. This is Vivian from Thornhill Enterprises. Can you start tomorrow?" The next morning, Everly arrived at 7:00 a.m., an hour before her official start time. The security guard, recognizing her from yesterday, issued her a temporary badge with a bemused expression. "Executive floor. You must be the new sacrifice." "I'm sorry. Mr. Thornhill's gone through 4 assistants this year. Good luck, honey." The executive floor was silent when she arrived. She found her desk, a sleek workstation positioned directly outside Alexander Thornhill's office, and began familiarizing herself with the computer system. By the time the elevator dinged at 7:45 a.m., she had already accessed her predecessor's files, organized Alexander's calendar for the day, and prepared a summary of his meetings. Alexander Thornhill stepped off the elevator, coffee in hand, and stopped short when he saw her. "You're early," he stated, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to get acclimated before the day began," Everly replied, standing from her chair. "I've reviewed your schedule and prepared briefing notes for your morning meetings. Also, the Tokyo office sent follow-up questions from yesterday's call. I flagged the urgent ones for your immediate attention." He studied her for a long moment. "Most people don't blast past the first week." "I'm not most people, Mr. Thornhill." The words came out before she could censor herself. For a second, she thought she saw the ghost of a smile on his face. "We'll see. I have a working breakfast with the board in 30 minutes. I need the quarterly projections and the Westlake acquisition proposal, already printed and waiting on your desk, along with talking points for each board member's specific concerns based on the minutes from previous meetings." This time, his surprise was visible. Without another word, he entered his office, leaving Everly to release the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The first week passed in a blur of 18-hour days, impossible demands, and the growing realization that Alexander Thornhill's cold exterior concealed a brilliant mind. His reputation for ruthlessness wasn't unfounded. She witnessed him dismantle business rivals in meetings and fire an executive who had failed to meet expectations. But she also glimpsed moments of unexpected consideration, like when he ensured a junior employee received credit for an innovative idea, or when he quietly donated to a children's hospital without publicity. For his part, Alexander found himself increasingly relying on Everly's efficiency and insight. She anticipated his needs before he expressed them, tactfully redirected his focus when he became overly critical, and managed his complex schedule with remarkable precision. By Friday, he had stopped checking her work and instead began asking for her opinion on matters that went well beyond her job description. "You've survived the first week," he commented as they worked late on Friday evening. Takeout containers from an upscale sushi restaurant scattered across the conference table between them. "Was that in doubt?" Everly asked, not looking up from the presentation she was refining. "I had the HR department prepare termination paperwork in advance. It's standard procedure." Everly paused, then resumed typing. "You can recycle it. I'm not going anywhere." "Why?" The question seemed to surprise even him. "Because I need this job." She finally looked up at him. "And because you need me, even if you wouldn't admit it. His expression hardened momentarily before he nodded once, returning to the financial report before him. They worked in silence for another hour before he abruptly said, "Your mother is ill." Everly's hands froze over the keyboard. "How did you?" "Background check. Stage 3 breast cancer. You're behind on the mortgage for your family home, and the medical bills are substantial." His tone was matter-of-fact, without judgment. "That's private information, Mr. Thornhill." Her voice was tight with sudden anger and embarrassment. "Not when you work directly for me. I need to know if there are factors that might affect your performance." "My personal challenges make me work harder, not less," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But I'd appreciate it if you didn't use my family's situation against me." Alexander studied her, noting the flash of defiance in her eyes. Most people cowered when he confronted them with uncomfortable truths. Everly Walsh pushed back, and something about that intrigued him. "Fair enough," he conceded. "Go home, Ms. Walsh. Get some rest. We have the Singapore deal to finalize on Monday." Over the following weeks, a subtle shift occurred in their working relationship. Alexander began trusting Everly with increasingly sensitive business matters, and she proved herself capable of handling complex problems with creativity and discretion. She learned to read his moods, knowing when to engage and when to give him space. He, in turn, became aware of her occasional phone calls to check on her mother and tacitly approved her brief absences for medical appointments. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of contentious negotiations with a potential business partner, Alexander emerged from his office to find Everly still at her desk, the office floor otherwise empty around them. "It's nearly midnight," he observed, loosening his tie. "Why are you still here?" Everly looked up, fatigue evident in her eyes. "The Singapore contracts needed revising based on today's discussion. I wanted to have them ready for your review in the morning." "That could have waited." "Excellence doesn't wait, Mr. Thornhill. Isn't that what you tell the executive team?" He leaned against her desk, studying her with a bemused expression. "You shouldn't use my words against me, Ms. Walsh. Then you shouldn't make them so quotable." The hint of playfulness in her voice surprised them both. "Have you eaten?" he asked suddenly. The abrupt change of subject caught her off guard. No. I was going to grab something on the way home." "Nothing will be open by the time you leave. Come on." He straightened and reached for his suit jacket. "Where are we going?" "My apartment isn't far. I can make pasta that won't kill us, and we can finish reviewing the contracts." Everly hesitated. The line between professional and personal seemed suddenly blurry. "Is that appropriate?" "It's pasta, Ms. Walsh, not a proposition," he replied dryly. "And we have work to complete." Alexander's penthouse occupied the top floor of a luxury building 10 blocks from the office. The space was surprisingly warm despite its modern design. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering city below, while comfortable furniture and well-stocked bookshelves suggested a man who valued both aesthetics and substance. As promised, he prepared a simple but delicious pasta dish, while Everly set up their work materials at the dining table. The domesticity of the scene felt surreal. Alexander Thornhill, business titan, chopping garlic, and occasionally asking her opinion on the sauce. "You're good at this," she commented as they ate. "Cooking is chemistry and timing. Not so different from business." He refilled her wine glass. "Tell me something about yourself that isn't in your personnel file." Everly considered the question. "I wanted to be a writer when I was younger. I used to fill notebooks with stories. What happened? Reality happened. Dad left. Mom got sick. Bills needed paying." She shrugged. "Dreams became luxuries." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "What would you write about if you could?" "People. Their complexities, their contradictions." She met his gaze directly. "People like you, actually." His eyebrow arched. "Me? You cultivate this image of the ruthless businessman. And it's not entirely false. But then you remember how your assistant's mother has chemo on Wednesdays, and you mysteriously have no morning meetings scheduled that day." She smiled slightly at his surprised expression. I noticed. The air between them changed, charged with something neither was prepared to name. Alexander cleared his throat and stood, gathering their plates. "We should get back to those contracts." They worked side by side until nearly 3 in the morning, their conversation gradually shifting from business to more personal topics. Everly learned that Alexander had built his company from scratch after dropping out of college, fueled by the determination to prove his worth to a father who had never believed in him. He, in turn, discovered her passion for literature and her deep commitment to her mother, who had sacrificed everything to give Everly opportunities. When a car service arrived to take her home, Alexander walked her to the door. "Thank you for your help tonight, Ms. Walsh." "Everly," she said impulsively. "When we're not in the office, you could call me Everly." He considered this, then nodded. "Alexander, then. When we're not in the office." Something fundamental had shifted between them, though neither acknowledged it explicitly. Over the following months, late work sessions at his apartment became more frequent, their conversations increasingly personal. Everly found herself looking forward to these evenings, when Alexander's guard lowered and the man beneath the CEO emerged, thoughtful, occasionally funny, and surprisingly vulnerable when discussing certain topics. For his part, Alexander discovered that Everly's presence was becoming necessary rather than merely convenient. Her quick mind challenged him, her compassion softened his harsher impulses, and her quiet strength in the face of her personal struggles earned his respect. He found himself making decisions with her opinions in mind, seeking her approval in ways that both confused and fascinated him. The change in their relationship didn't go unnoticed at the office. Rumors circulated about the nature of their after-hours meetings, fueled by the noticeable shift in Alexander's demeanor around Everly. He had always been respected, but feared rather than liked. Now, employees noted with surprise that he occasionally smiled in meetings and exhibited patience with mistakes that would have previously triggered his infamous temper. "People are talking," Vivian from HR commented to Everly one day in the break room, "about you and Mr. Thornhill." "There's nothing to talk about," Everly replied, her tone neutral despite the flush creeping up her neck. "We work well together, that's all." Vivian's knowing smile suggested she didn't believe this, but she simply shrugged. "Just be careful. Office romances rarely end well, especially when there's a power imbalance." "It's not a romance," Everly insisted, ignoring the pang of something that felt uncomfortably like disappointment. That evening, as they worked on the upcoming quarterly presentation in Alexander's living room, Everly found herself distracted by Vivian's warning. She had been so focused on maintaining professional boundaries that she hadn't acknowledged to herself how her feelings had evolved. Alexander Thornhill was no longer just her demanding boss. He had become someone whose approval she sought, whose rare smiles she treasured, whose presence made even the most ordinary moments feel significant. "You're quiet tonight," Alexander observed, looking up from his laptop. "Just thinking about the projection models," she lied. He studied her for a moment. "You're a terrible liar, Everly. What's really bothering you?" She hesitated before deciding on honesty. "People at the office are talking about us. About our working relationship." "Ah." His expression became guarded. "Does that concern you?" "It concerns me that it might affect how people perceive my role in the company. I've worked hard to be taken seriously." Alexander closed his laptop and moved to sit beside her on the couch. "Your competence speaks for itself. No one who has worked with you could doubt your professional abilities. But people will always gossip, especially when they see." He paused, searching for the right words. "Changes they don't understand." "Changes." His eyes met hers. "I'm different when I'm with you. Apparently, it's noticeable." The candor of his admission caught her off guard. "Different how?" "Less," he gestured vaguely. "Walled off. More human, I suppose." A self-deprecating smile crossed his face. "God knows my board of directors has commented on it." Everly's heart raced as she ventured into dangerous territory. "And how do you feel about that change?" Alexander was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "I've built my entire career on being in control of my company, my emotions, my relationships. Control creates certainty, and certainty leads to success." He looked at her directly. "But with you, I'm not entirely in control, and that's unsettling." Unsettling bad or unsettling good? His gaze dropped to her lips for a fleeting second before returning to her eyes. "I haven't decided yet." The tension between them was palpable, suspended in the charged air of the dimly lit living room. Everly knew they were standing at a precipice. One step forward would irrevocably change their relationship, while a step back would require pretending this moment never happened. Alexander made the decision for both of them, rising abruptly from the couch. "It's late. We should call it a night." The retreat stung more than Everly wanted to admit. "Of course. I'll gather my things." As the car service drove her home, Everly stared out at the rain-slicked streets and acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding. She was falling in love with Alexander Thornhill, and it could only end in heartbreak. Their worlds were too different, the power dynamic too imbalanced, the professional risks too great. Tomorrow, she would need to rebuild the walls between them, for both their sakes. But the universe had other plans. When Everly arrived at work the next morning, her phone rang with a call from her mother's neighbor. Her mother had collapsed and been rushed to the hospital. Without hesitation, Everly grabbed her purse and headed for the elevator, nearly colliding with Alexander as he stepped out. "Everly, what's wrong?" His concern was immediate upon seeing her distressed expression. "My mother's in the hospital. I need to go." "Of course. Take whatever time you need." He hesitated, then added, "Would you like me to come with you?" The offer surprised her. "That's not necessary. You have meetings all day." "Meetings can be rescheduled." "Alexander, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to." His voice softened. "I want to." Something about his steady presence beside her in the hospital waiting room kept Everly from falling apart completely. He handled the administrative paperwork, spoke firmly but respectfully to the medical staff when information was slow in coming, and quietly held her hand when the doctor finally emerged with news. "The cancer has spread to her lungs," Everly explained later, as they sat in the hospital cafeteria with untouched cups of coffee between them. "They're recommending an experimental treatment, but insurance won't cover it." Alexander's expression was resolute. "What's the cost?" "It doesn't matter. It's not an option." "Everly." His voice was gentle but insistent. "What's the cost?" She named a figure that represented more money than she would earn in 5 years. Alexander nodded once, pulled out his phone, and made a brief call. "What are you doing?" she asked when he hung up. "Ensuring your mother gets the treatment she needs." "I can't accept that. It's too much." His eyes met hers. "Then consider it an advance on your salary. It would take me decades to repay you. Then consider it a gift." "Alexander, please." His hand covered hers on the table. "Let me do this." In that moment, looking into his eyes, Everly saw something that transcended professional boundaries or wealthy man's charity. She saw a man who cared deeply, who wanted to ease her burden not out of obligation, but out of genuine emotion. "Why?" she whispered. Alexander's thumb traced gentle patterns on her hand. "Because I've spent my entire life believing that success meant never needing anyone. And then you walked into my office and proved me wrong." The days that followed created a new dynamic between them. As Everly split her time between the hospital and work, Alexander rearranged his schedule to accommodate her needs, often joining her at the hospital in the evenings. The staff began to assume he was family, and neither of them corrected this impression. One evening, as Everly's mother slept peacefully after a treatment session, Alexander found Everly in the hospital garden, staring up at the star-studded sky. "The doctor says she's responding well," he said, joining her on the bench. "Thanks to you." Everly's voice was thick with emotion. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." I don't want repayment. He turned to face her. Everly, do you know why I hired you? The question seemed out of place. Because I'm good at my job. Because you looked at me without fear or agenda. Because you spoke to me like a person, not a position. His hand found hers in the darkness. Everyone in my life wants something from me. My money, my power, my connections. But you just wanted to do good work. That's not entirely true, Everly admitted softly. I wanted to save my home, to help my mother. Yes, but you intended to earn it. There's a difference. Alexander's fingers intertwined with hers. Do you know what I realized today, watching you with your mother? I realized that for all my wealth and power, I've never had what you have. Someone who loves me unconditionally. Someone I would fight for without hesitation. Everly's heart raced as Alexander shifted closer. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've spent my life building walls to keep people out, and you somehow slipped right through them. I'm saying that I'm tired of pretending this is just a professional relationship. His free hand gently cupped her cheek. I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, and it terrifies me. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Everly knew that responding would change everything. Her job, her reputation, her future. But looking into Alexander's eyes, seeing the vulnerability beneath his usual confidence, she couldn't deny the truth any longer. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. And you're right. It's terrifying. His kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When she responded, pulling him closer, the kiss deepened, expressing all the emotions they had carefully contained for months. When they finally parted, both breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. This complicates everything, she murmured. I excel at handling complications. His smile was tender, a side of him few ever witnessed. We'll figure it out together. But complications arose sooner than either anticipated. The next morning, a tabloid newspaper featured a grainy photo of their kiss in the hospital garden, with the headline, Theorenhial Tycoons OFIC, Romance. Secretary CDUC is Violion Aeroboas. The story painted Everly as a gold,